Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Ladies and gentlemen, this podcast is brought to you in part by our Patreon page at patreon.com/Gear Network. That's Patreon, patreon.com/Gear Network, GERE Network. While you don't have to do this, if you would like to support us, that is a very easy way to do it. For as little as $2 a month, you can get this podcast as well as all others completely commercial free, as well as exclusive content like Patreon-only podcasts, videocasts, and blogs that are not regularly available on GearNetwork.com or any RSS feed. Your support helps us continue to keep up with upgrades to software, purchase professional equipment, and assist us with production costs. Again, patreon.com/Gear Network. Do it right now for as little as $2 a month.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
From wherever we decide studios, broadcasted live on iTunes, Spreaker, and worldwide, this is the Turnbuckle Talk Radio Podcast with your host, the producer, Pat G. The G stands for gangsta. And now kick back and get ready for the eargasms.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 100 of the TTRP Turnbuckle Talk Radio Podcast. And yes, while episode 100 was originally going to be a straight-out roundtable discussion biopic of Chris Benoit, due to New York State recovering and people going back to work and everything else going on with COVID, we didn't really get a chance to really do that episode. So we kind of switched gears because there's a lot of shit going on in the wrestling world that takes precedence right now. And we're going to start with the whole COVID-19 situation. Of course, we are brought to you by Gear Network and, of course, GearNetwork.com. Myself, Pat G, along with Dan Fury, the Furious One. Now, as we all know, COVID-19, the pandemic, coronavirus, has made its effect on sports and life in general, and now it has finally seemed to pass that it's finally gotten around to pro wrestling as on the major sense of the world, is because we know from the independent scene a lot of companies stopped running shows. They just stopped altogether because there were all the stay-at-home orders and everything, but there were three companies actually that decided to keep running in the state of Florida because somehow they manipulated the government into making them essential, and now we're finally seeing the results of this as there are cases being announced and people being around cases. WWE getting, there's been reports from various sources. I believe Ryan Satin was the big one, and it's already been confirmed also by Dave Metzler of his report, where WWE has already been positive with a few people, and there have been reports saying that they already have over a dozen cases to start. And then you focus on AEW, where Jon Moxley has been pulled from tonight's AEW Dynamite, as well as QT Marshall, because of their potential abate around being someone that had COVID-19. So it now seems like while COVID-19 coronavirus has affected everything else, it's now come around and it's starting to affect the things that it may have not gotten on that first time around.
You know, let me be clear before I make these next statements. Thank you, Pat G, for the awesome introduction, as always. And I mean, congratulations are in order before we start this show. Earlier last year, I was asked by Pat G, or later last year, whatever, if I would take over co-hosting from Cyclone Jones, and join you weekly on the Turnbuckle Talk Radio podcast. And happy 100th to both you and Ish and Gear Network for Turnbuckle Talk Radio podcast, giving you an extremely down-the-middle, unbiased opinion on professional wrestling, both independent and across the world. It's truly been an honor to work with you, and the fact that we are at episode 100 in this show's history, a weekly podcast. I mean, it's more than awesome. It's something that's much needed and much loved. So much love to you, and much love to Cyclone Jones for the hot tag to put me in this show. It's been a true honor, and especially now that we've hit episode 100. Now, with that being said, I'm also not a doctor, so let me be blunt about not being a doctor. COVID-19 has changed the world, much in the way that some of us remember September 11th changed things. There was a while there where sporting was not taking place, but yet the first thing 2 days later after September 11th was professional wrestling. Pro wrestling, the show must go on. Vince McMahon has said that and done that time and time again. So both he and Tony Khan, respectively, and Triple H and Cody, all together with separate companies, have run wrestling shows in the United States. Luckily, North Carolina and Orlando had allowed them to be able to do so. Everyone was getting tested. Independent professional wrestling has honestly been put on hold. Hopefully, guys are staying in shape. We've had this conversation before where, be ring ready. But there comes a time where you have to face the harsh reality. And the harsh reality is this is a disease, this is a virus that we don't have a grasp on. I mean, you have to say that in the last 2 days alone, I mean, you and I are from New York, Western and Upstate respectively. Governor Cuomo has put a travel ban on people coming in and going out of the state. If you are going to a state that is considered a high-risk state, you need to quarantine for 14 days after your return home now. Okay? Florida, California, Texas, and a bunch of other states are on the hot list for this. In order to travel out to other states like Maine, you have to self-quarantine for 14 days before leaving the state to go. I mean, the requirements in order just to travel, the EU, the European Union, is deciding today whether or not in July, when they allow travel again over in Europe, if the United States is going to be allowed, because we have not put a real control on COVID in America. Not only that, but across the world, flare-ups are starting to happen, with the exclusion of New Zealand, who has had no new cases and no new deaths, but they're on a total lockdown. You cannot enter the country of New Zealand. That's how they're keeping this contained. So for professional wrestling to be affected by COVID-19 is no surprise. What is a surprise to me is the fact that it took so long for it. I mean, if you remember, lockdown really began for the country St. Patrick's Day weekend. That's when everything came to a screeching halt. I mean, even to the point where the first show that was televised on the internet, the Dropkick Murphys, did their St. Patrick's Day show, which I've been to in Boston. Yeah. They did it in a studio with a couple of cams, and they streamed it live. NXT, AEW were on Wednesdays, SmackDown and Raw were live-ish. We managed to get WrestleMania 36, which, by the way, the fact that we even got that was awesome, but we'll get to it later in the show, why it's even more of a monumental thing that WrestleMania 36 even took place, and the manner it did. I would really like for everyone to just take a moment to consider that, what you read online and what you see, and it's been coined recently calling it care fatigue, where you don't care about wearing a mask, you don't want to go out. Yeah, there are reasons why this stuff is the way it is. I mean, this virus is ever changing, and I mean, in one day, Florida has had 5,500 cases. California just had over 6,000 new cases. Texas has exploded in the last couple of days with new cases. And I mean, this is just from relaxing a little bit. Now, I might be pissed off in New York State because gyms, movie theaters, and malls and certain other venues are not being allowed to be open by Governor Cuomo in Phase 4. He wants to push it out even further. I might be completely fucking pissed off. Pardon my French. I know that's going to be edited out. There's my one F-bomb. Sorry, Gear Network. But the thing that really upsets me about all this is we see these flare-ups, we see these severities happening. I think it's time we maybe understand that when CDC is telling you we're not through this, we just got through the first wave, there's another spike that will be coming. Maybe we need to take this more seriously. As of today, of this recording, I just canceled my trip to the Spartan Trifecta World Championships in Sparta in November out of concern for what is going on. I'm willing to give up that, knowing that there's a potential for me to get sick and me to get quarantined in a foreign country for a month. I would hate for some of these wrestlers to push to have independent shows come back, only for them or anyone in the back to get a severe case of this, because this is not an old people's disease like we were hearing about in January and February. I mean, Olympic level athletes are getting sick. Okay, dudes in their 30s who are relatively fit are getting sick.
There's been multiple cases across the four major sports.
Yeah, NBA, Major League Baseball, football, and now professional wrestling are all facing this. And yeah, you can be a super athlete with a great immune system, and you might be able to shake it. That happens. But then there's the flip side to this virus, where you are essentially facing your mortality. I mean, if you want example of this, listen to Joe Rogan Experience, the Michael Yo episode. If you want an experience like that, Google the Olympic swimmer with COVID-19. There was a Spartan elite champion who had COVID-19, and he was on ventilators with IVs, and he was facing death. And this is a dude chiseled out of granite. I mean, we need to come to terms with the fact that it's okay as a people for us to admit we don't know what we don't know. It's okay to not know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And
as much as I would like to be throwing kettlebells around, I also would like to see my kid walk down the aisle and graduate with a fucking PhD. Sorry, second F-bomb. My bad, Gear Network.
And what's funny is the county that the WWE records their shows in, which I believe is Orange County, Florida, and that Orlando area, is they had the whole they made it mandatory for everybody to have masks on, and then you would see the people in the crowd, and a lot of people that were watching online and the internet wrestling community was like, why aren't they wearing masks, and blah 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 blah, and then WWE came out and was like, well, the people that were in attendance were WWE PC students and family members. Like, okay, so... And they're like, oh, yeah, everybody's getting tested and everything. But now, all of a sudden, the reports are coming out, like, today that, yeah, you guys were testing people, but... the number of people that may be positive with COVID-19 are in the higher double digits and everything. And what makes it even worse is, prime example is, I went back with New York State doing what New York State has done, and Governor Cuomo doing everything he's done and whatnot. I went back to work in my office, the office that I worked in, and it's like you can't. The rules are simple. Nobody's allowed in the building before 9 a.m. The minute you walk in, one of the managers is there with the thermometer, asking the questions that you're getting asked, and you have to wear a face mask at all times outside of being at your actual workstation. And then you have to constantly use social distancing, which is the 6 feet. You have to use the precautions that have been out there and everything, and it's kind of like, all right, well, yeah, we're doing what we're doing, but like you said, that second wave's going to come, and for all the people out there that feel like they shouldn't have to wear the mask and they shouldn't have to social distance and all this, it's kind of like, not only is it's affecting everyday life in the sense that it's going to continue, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because now we're getting into the summer months where everybody wants to travel, and all the states are battling each other with travel laws, because Florida was like, anybody from the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, if you come to our state, it's an automatic 14-day quarantine, and then New York was like, okay, well, if you're going to do it to us, then we're going to do it to you guys, and whatnot. And that was one of the main reasons where you made the decision to cancel the Spartan race for Greece in November. I was supposed to go to Disney World at the end of September, and that trip now is being postponed until at least 2021, where I've made other arrangements to go somewhere else for that time. And hope that everything's okay by the time that last week of September comes up, to where I can go enjoy the Outer Banks.
Nice.
So it's one of the things of looking at it now is, yes, while COVID-19 affected pro wrestling in the sense of it took away WrestleMania, it took away the independent wrestling shows, it took various aspects away. It's now like, okay, well, you didn't, it's like karma, so to speak. It's karma, so to speak, that now all of a sudden it's like, okay, you know what? Wrestling got you guys through till now. You're potentially getting basketball back. You're getting baseball back potentially. You're getting the Premier League soccer is back to playing after being gone for 100+ days. And granted, there's no fans in the stand. They have pumped in fan music, which is entertaining in the sense, because you're watching them play soccer and you're hearing the fans cheer and everything, but you're like, there's no fans in the stands. What is going on? Yeah. It's now like karma's kind of like, okay, you know what? You're getting the stuff that we took away from you at first, but the one thing that kept you going, we're now going to take. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because if the cases get bad enough, somebody made the quip on Twitter where if some of the cases come out and it's some of the bigger stars, you might end up getting a 9-match series between Cedric Alexander and one of the PC performers. So it's going to be interesting, because we mentioned WrestleMania 36. WrestleMania 36 happened in the very beginning of all of this. And granted, yes, a lot of WrestleMania 36 was previously taped, and we all know this. It was previously recorded, done in a closed set with the utmost security and everything. We did get one of the best matches of pro wrestling it from that WrestleMania, and that being The Undertaker. And us changing gears a little bit, going from what COVID-19 is about potentially to do to wrestling to now where the shining light, so to speak, as far as pro wrestling this week, as far as a business, was the end of The Undertaker's docuseries on the WWE Network, and them showcasing the match between him and AJ Styles and how that match came to be. Now, I don't know about you, it was emotional.
So I'm going to try to avoid being long-winded with this, which is kind of tough for me at times, because I like to talk. So in the start of this docuseries, knowing it was a 5-part episode, there was a part of me, okay, that really was hoping that at the end of the last episode, I would get the payoff that I wanted. In 2017, I remember leaving work, and I'm thinking, I got home, and I'm like, WrestleMania's still on? Like, I thought I would have missed, and instead I caught the main event, and I watched that match thinking, like a lot of people did, God, that match sucked. I didn't want that to be Undertaker's last match, because he didn't look like The Undertaker. And then he talked about that in the documentary. He really got into his disapproval of his performance, And then why? And I kept asking myself, well, why is The Undertaker staying around? But it's funny, this documentary is inside of the mind of every professional wrestler who's ever laced up with boots, whether independent or pro. Like, if they ever quit the sport, they want to be able to point to the match and say, that's the match that I'm leaving on. That's the high note. And the series was really... It's a beautiful series. If you haven't watched it, y'all need to go on the network, borrow a friend's password, get the free month, whatever. But the thing that really got me was in this last episode, how serendipity played a huge role in this match, because while an AJ Styles versus Undertaker match would have been great in a ring, okay, I think AJ would have worked his phenomenal ass off to make The Undertaker look great. The presentation, and we talked about it on this podcast, I've talked about it on other podcasts, the Boneyard match was a chaos Undertaker comic come to life, and it was a Clint Eastwood 70s action film come to life, and I absolutely loved it. And I said it when I watched it, if that's the last time I see The Undertaker in a match, I'd be happy. And it was. Undertaker's officially, after 30 years in WWE, is retired.
Yeah.
Like, I'm on Father's Day of 2020, I sat there and I cried my eyes out, not because I was sad. I cried my eyes out because I was happy. Because as a person who's been in that ring and as a fan of The Undertaker, you wanted that man to get the closure that he deserved, because here was a guy that, was during all of the eras of pro wrestling from 1990, where it was the Hogan era, all the way to this modern era we find ourselves in. He was the pillar, and he was the measuring stick by which all other talent had to be up to. And
an interesting fact, John JC, who owns Gear Network, who gives us his platform, he posted on Facebook a couple days ago, I think, if his math was right, from 1973 until now, there has been at least some interaction involving Andre the Giant and The Undertaker in a WWE ring.
Yeah. If if you look at them, people like to talk about Hulk, Stone Cold, The Rock, John Cena. Andre was the boss for so long.
Yep.
And that when Andre was phasing out, Undertaker really took that ball and ran with it and became the Godfather that people talk about.
The bigger than lifestyle type character.
Yeah, the guy that you went to, the judge. You know what I mean, like the man. And I was so happy for him to finally be able to say, you know what? Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm done.
Yeah,
because it was really
his direct words is, I have no intention getting into a ring again.
Yeah.
To be honest,
it's just really tough.
Yeah,
to say,
it's definitely very tough and everything, but it's a shot to how dedicated the man was to his career. And what's funny is now that the Undertaker is now going to be relished in the same light as so many other legends, Andre, Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, so many others. And what's funny is it's one of them things that you look at pro wrestling as a thing today, and what's funny is I wanted to look at just the Undertaker himself, and if you really watch that series from start to finish, it's a complete up and down battle with it for that man, because it starts off like, okay, the Roman Reigns match was it, like that was his way of going out. He lost the match. He put the hat and the gloves in the middle of the ring. He was passing on the torch, so to speak, to Roman. But then watching that match back, it wasn't what it needed to be. So he needed to redeem himself. And then it was this constant back and forth of him having an okay match, but then him having a bad match and it looking like crap, and then him needing to redeem himself. And the thing with AJ is that match, that Boneyard match, if that's the last time the Undertaker is involved in any kind of match, whether it be in the ring, whether it be in a Boneyard situation like that, we can say that we're happy with it. It was a career. Now, I know there's the cliche statement that when you finally retire, you go out on your back. I don't think that needs to apply to The Undertaker, because there's no reason for him. He tried to go out on his back, and it wasn't what he wanted. It was not what he wanted. But no. It seemed like he was so pleased with how that Boneyard match turned out that it gave him peace of mind, soul, and body to go, I'm done. That's my last match. That was the end of my legacy. And now it's time for these younger guys to create their own.
And that was something the documentary did, was, him going to the PC. I don't see The Undertaker disappearing forever. He's going to be at the PC. He's going to work with guys. He's going to make them better. He's got so much knowledge that he can give, which they showed in the last part of the documentary. The Undertaker's legacy is solidified as a performer. Now he's going to hand these guys his knowledge, which is even more important to the business.
Absolutely. But as we get close to the break here, we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back. We'll focus on the meat and potatoes, as Cyclone Jones used to call it, of the show. And boy, it's a lot. It's a lot to talk about. So keep it locked here, TTRP. And we're back here on Turnbuckle Soccer Radio Podcast. Padgy, Dan Fury. I'd like to thank RetroSoft Studios, Michael Herman, for that great interview talking about Retromania Wrestling. But continuing on to a more important thing of the wrestling world. As you called it, the Me Too movement has hit pro wrestling. Now, for everybody out there, the Me Too movement involved all these people that had done previous sexual acts, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, whatever you want to call it, and their victims, so to speak, coming out and with screenshots and emails and messages and them going, and you had the Harvey Weinsteins and the Louis C.K.'s, and it seemed like that pro wrestling was kind of escaping that a little bit, because no one really was talking about that subject in pro wrestling. There had been moments of that where people had brought up things because there had been, as far as New York, I don't know about other states, I know in New York there had been a company in New York State that was allowing a legitimate person that was on the sexual offender registry come to their shows. I do know that, but you never really heard of everything. And then over the last week, we've seen reports of people coming out against Joey Ryan. We've seen people coming out, reports against numerous people that were in Impact Wrestling. Dave Chris, Michael Elgin, numerous others, and there was a little bit of a list that was released on Twitter that had numerous names on it. Tessa Blanchard, Jack Gallagher. Like, it seemed like pro wrestling, from the highest of highs in WWE to the lowest of lows in your local independent wrestling company, there was somebody getting named. And
yeah,
the fact that one on the list that I got shown by Twitter by my co-host Dan, one of the names on that list were very personal to me. He's a very good friend of mine. He's family to me. And when I saw it, I kind of it threw me back, because I'm like, yo, that's not him. Yeah, I'll say, yeah, he's made jokes, he's made statements that probably shouldn't have been made in a sense or whatever, but we all have done that. I've done that. And like we were talking before we got on air, we all have skeletons in our closet of things that we've done and said. But it was more meaningful to you, so to speak, because I only had the one and he addressed it, and it's done and over with and whatnot. But you personally, there were 4 names on this list?
Yeah.
That you're legitimate personal friends with, and or have shared multiple locker rooms with, multiple shows with, and with the whole situation that happened, what's your feeling on this?
You know, I knew once that this story broke, you and I had talked last Friday about, okay, we're switching gears, we're going to do episode 100 on partly on this. What's your take? And it's tough because you're right. There were several names on the list that either I'm personal friends with or I've been in locker rooms with, and you hear it, and then you hear the accounts of the speaking out individuals, and I'm not going to name names or anything, and you just go, what? Like what? And you see screenshots and correspondences and all this other stuff, and I didn't know how to feel. I still don't know how to feel because I'm processing some of it. One of the individuals I talked to, I as soon as I saw his name, I was like, I got a hold of him because this didn't seem to fit the context of this person that I know. And after talking with him, and having a very honest conversation, I have my opinions on the matter, but there are a lot of claims and proof being brought out in all of this. And, this is supposed to be a fun sport. And then you hear about some of these assaults and these cases, and it curdles, it puts a fucking stranglehold on your internal organs because you're just like, I don't see this. And then you see these individuals posting from promoters who are downplaying the situation that they found themselves in with performers. You see screenshots of people's family members being like, this person is messed up because of you. And you're seeing all this, and it shocks me to the bone. I don't know. I don't know how to feel. Because it's in a lot of ways you become really close with these people. Like, there was a time where every weekend I was booked for several shows a weekend every month. So I was seeing some people more than I was my own ex-wife and son.
Yeah.
I'd seen my coworkers and wrestlers more than I did my son's mother and my son. And it's very tough, you know what I mean, to imagine these people doing it. And it's even tougher when you see screenshots and conversations, and you look at it and you're like, this person may not have been the person that I was friends with, that I called brother, that I called sister. I just hope that this is a wake-up call for promoters to be mindful of the individuals that they have in their locker rooms. And really, it's weird because I've seen these messages, and I'm trying not to be long-winded like always. I've seen these messages on Twitter and everything about, you were around these people and yet you didn't know.
Yeah.
Not to me, but in a broad sense, like, oh, you had to have seen something. No, that's the thing, is that, much like a Ted Bundy, some people are just so slick at hiding it, or a Ted Kaczynski, they're so slick at hiding it that you don't see these people. I mean, not to bring up, F it, dude. I'm very honest about it. But during my time in professional wrestling, and just in life, yes, I cheated on my son's mom. I was very public with it on this podcast several years ago. In fact, this was the first podcast that I talked on, acknowledging the situation after after it all went down. And, I know a lot of people were like, wow, that took some guts. No, taking guts would have said no to certain situations. Guts would have been trying to be a better provider. You know, did it teach me a very valuable lesson? Yeah, it taught me what not to do. But at the same token, it probably shouldn't have taken that to teach me how to be a good boyfriend and provider for my kid. You know, it's one of these things where you don't, and no one knew. No one in the locker rooms knew. Not even the people I rode with knew. I kept that so quiet that they didn't even know until literally they were getting messages from people. Like, that's how little they knew, and they saw me so much. I want the people who are reporting this to be heard. I want people who are telling their stories. I mean, even Keith Lee told a story about an incident that happened with him, which, I mean, Keith Lee is a huge dude. And the situation that he talked about on his Twitter, where he woke up in an apartment that wasn't his, without clothing, not knowing how he got there because he got drugged, accepting a drink from a woman the night before.
Yeah.
You know, it can happen. It can happen even to people that we see on TV every week.
Yeah, and what's funny is I'm gonna say this, is there had been a few times that I had been out on the road working a show as a ref or a ring announcer by myself. Like, I got booked. It was my booking. Like, I didn't have anybody to go with, and I had asked and couldn't find anybody else to go with or whatever. And there had been a couple of times where, like, things just seemed sketchy to me or whatever because of certain people how acting. And then there was one time that I worked a show, and I wasn't by myself. I was with another wrestler and his wife or whatever, and whatever it may be, like, I wasn't feeling great. It was just before I having, like, my tooth having, like, its abscess blowing up in my mouth, but, like, I had severe mouth pain. And I'm sitting there just like chewing on ice, and got ice. And one of the wrestlers gave me like, what's wrong? And I told him what's wrong, and he gave me something, and I was fine up until I started, like, getting ready to drive home. And then I ended up, like, going to Denny's, like, after, and I'm sitting there just, like, not feeling good. And I just, like, I looked at the people I was with. I was like, listen, I was like, we got to find somewhere to crash. Like, I don't feel good at all. Like, at all. Like, and I was lucky enough that I was with people that I trusted, where I knew nothing was going to happen to me because I trusted them. But that's not a situation that a lot of people have been in. And from all the stories and screenshots and everything, it's been men, it's been women, it's been trainers. I know a lot of people are out there calling for different things to happen and whatnot. And there was a Facebook status. One of the guys that I'm friends with, that I met through pro wrestling out in Ohio, he shared a status from someone, and it was basically like this giant list of just rules that, like, you should keep nowadays. And some of it, like, honestly, some of it's not wrong. Like, honestly, some of it's not wrong. And it's now putting the heat on, like you said, promoters to really look at who they're booking and what kind of accommodations they have set up. Because I'm sure you've seen it. I know I have, where there's been women on the show and there's not a separate locker room.
Dude, I have worked shows. I'm not going to name female wrestlers. I have changed okay, I don't get completely naked in locker rooms. I wear a man thong. Weird to admit on a podcast. But I would wear my man thong that I would wear under my gear, under my street clothes, and get there because you didn't know what the setup was going to be.
Yeah.
I was right next to one female, like I had a chair, and then her chair was right next to mine because we were in some, like a platform stage in an American Legion in some town with a tarp covering the locker room with the entrance. And I'm just like, we used to call it nut to butt in the Army, but I'm like shoulder to shoulder with this girl. She's trying to get changed. Her person that she was with was kind of like trying to hold the towel, but it's not like you couldn't see what was going on.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting here and I'm looking at the ceiling like, dude, I'm uncomfortable. And if I'm uncomfortable, I know she's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's like that opens the window for stuff to happen, dude. I mean, I'm not saying that it should. And that's the thing. Like, this goes back to the whole fucking, pardon my French, sorry. We really do try to keep my swearing under wraps. But, I knew this was going to be a hot button subject tonight.
Yeah.
We really do. There really are gentlemen in the locker rooms. There really are good guys in the locker rooms. There are certain promotions I've been to that have venues where the women have their own locker room. Maybe someone that they know that's a guy goes in there with them, but they have their own. And you don't knock on that door. It is for female talent only. I have seen wrestling companies that go out of their way to give the female wrestlers a locker room of their own. I have also seen companies where it's like, change with everyone else in the hallway.
Yeah, I've been at shows where the men and women have separate locker rooms. I've been at shows where the promoters, like one of the main companies I worked for a while as a ring announcer, it was a concert hall type setup, but the locker room we were in, the guy that owned the building, like, literally built this, like, 8x12 setup of 2x4s and curtain and, like, dark, thick blankets and kind of, like, pinned them against and just left it open, like, and had a dark black curtain on just so they could go, and he set it up in the one corner, and that was, like, it was in the locker room, but it was shaped off for the girls that were on the show so they could change without having to, like, make the walk to the bathroom, change in the bathroom, walk back, and all that. With fans.
Yeah. Like, oh, here I am changing in a urinal, and
the fans are walking in and going to the bathroom and everything.
Yeah, and I mean, this will help weed out people in the business that are not great people to others. You know what I mean? I hope. I really do. But I mean, just like music, musicians, there are musical acts that have been accused of being very abusive to women.
Yeah.
And some of them are multi-millionaires, almost billionaires. And you hear these reports of this. It's nice that our society and professional wrestling has kind of said, not here, not this bullcrap. The climate changed.
I guess my biggest thing is with the whole situation is, yes, it's really shitty that both men and women have come out and have stated that they've been a victim of sexual assault, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, whatever. And whether it's women's to guys or guys to women or everything, my contention with the situation is when pro wrestlers decide to add fans on Snapchat or Instagram or their personal Facebook or whatever, and they're obviously under the age of 18. Mm-hmm. That's my issue. And granted, I've never said anything because, hey, people are going to do what they're going to do. But with the constant coming out of screenshots and everything, and most of these conversations being on like Instagram or Facebook Messenger or Snapchat, it's like, yo, do you guys not understand the world we live in? Like, it's technology. It's not the 1990s anymore. Like, you can't, if shit doesn't get deleted, like,
no,
I guarantee you, I'm gonna say it, I guarantee you, there is most likely some ex-girlfriend of mine out there with very suggestive pictures of me that, had we had a bad breakup, that could have turned worse. Okay? Mm-hmm. It's the case in point of everybody has skeletons. It's just of how bad have you hurt the person that has access to the skeletons. And the thing is with all the shows that have been out there that have focused on rape and pedophilia and everything, I'm trying to understand how a grown adult, and I know there's been numerous accounts of tortured main name guys, Joey and everything out there, and that have talked to the underage people. I'm trying, my biggest thing is, how as a legitimate adult male or female do you, like, come to grips with the fact that it's okay to talk a certain way to someone that's under the age of 18?
Yeah, well,
and I understand other countries have I understand different states, different countries have different rules as far as what the age of consent is. I understand that. But it's like common sense that if someone is not 18 or over, they are a child. They are still a kid.
And some of the things they were saying is they were intoxicated during the time, like both parties. It's this entire situation is rough. I mean, dudes have lost their jobs, even over stuff they've said on podcasts.
Yeah,
dudes have lost, have been suspended. It's now public knowledge about Sammy Guerra. And his indefinite suspension from AEW
due to his comments from years ago about Sasha Banks.
Yeah, and you have to look at it. I'm sure he thought it was a funny joke to him and to the people that were in the podcast with him and who would be listening. I'm sure he, in his immature brain, he thought it. The only thing that I could hope is that he's growing up and he realizes, man, maybe that was dumb to say. It's kind of like a comedian going back and listening to their old material and being like, oh, why did I try to make that joke funny?
Yeah, well, the Sammy Guerra thing and Sasha Banks, like, there was the report that I saw is Sasha did make a statement. She's like, listen, we talked, he apologized for it, but it was still wrong in what he said. Like, yeah. She still condemned it, but she's like, hey, we talked, he apologized for it. Like, he tried to make right by it. And unfortunately, like, it's the world we live in. And what's bad now is now you're going to have, it's going to be one of them things of when the independent shows start running again, and we're talking like your regular local independent wrestling company shows again, it's going to be a lot. They're going to reach out to people work their shows or try to see if they're available or booking. And I guarantee you, for some companies, you're going to run into problems because people are going to go, listen, you defended this. Like, granted, you didn't defend it by name, but I know on very good knowledge that you defended the company's decision on this. Like, I'm not going to work with you, or
I'm not going to be part of a company that does X, Y, and Z.
Yeah,
you know, it's absolutely true. We are in New York that has a rich amount of wrestling in the Northeast. You know, it's a hub for wrestling, and there are promotions in the Northeast that, you know, when some of this stuff broke, they made the right decisions. They took action where action was needed, and there have been cases where other promotions don't want to admit that they had any wrongdoing, and that's fine if that's how they want to be. I mean, it's independent wrestling. But at the end of the day, it comes down to having a moral compass on certain things.
Yeah.
And, you know, generally speaking, if you've got a broken moral compass, others are going to see it. It's just we're in a world now where people will call you out on it.
Yeah, and the thing is from all intents and purposes, there is a lot of call for changes. Like, if you're gonna have female wrestlers in your company or on your show, then there has to be a female referee. There has to be a female, like, they have to a lot of women have talked about creating a program where it's all for women to help them travel and help them do this and everything. I know, I saw something on Facebook about it, and a woman that I respect, that I've worked shows with, Tara Calloway, she said she's working on putting something together in that aspect. I know a couple other women wrestlers out there have been very, very vocal in the same sense of, like, with all this going on, it's like we're traveling together. Like, we're trying to figure out a way to travel together. This way, no one is by themselves with, like, a car full of guys or something, or traveling with just one guy and have to wonder what's going to happen if they have to stay somewhere or stop at a rest stop to grab, like, a 45-minute nap or something.
Yeah. And or like some of the stories where it's like they're sharing a hotel, or they're letting them stay at their house, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's insane.
It is insane. It is insane, but it's one of the things of, it seems like 2020 is turning out to be exactly what I said it was episodes back, a reset. It's 2020 is becoming a complete full-on unplug the modem, push the reset button on professional wrestling. And it's a matter of who's going to accept the reset and who's going to not accept the reset. And so far, we're seeing who's trying to reset and roll with the changes, and we're seeing who's not accepting that reset and trying to keep in their old ways. That's the best way I can end it.
Yeah.
So, but for Dan Fury, I'm Pat G. This has been TTRP, Turnbuckle Talk Radio Podcast. Check out all the great content from Gear Network at gearnetwork.com, and as well, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter when it does get unsuspended or I create a new account. Most likely going to create a new account. So, but anyway, thank you for listening. As always, keep it locked, and we'll see you on the flip side. The Turnbuckle Talk Radio podcast is brought to you by Gear Network and ShopGear.com. We can be listened to via Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and everywhere else you can get your podcasts. The TTRP introduction was done by Trevor Dugan. The show is hosted by Patrick Ancheski and Daniel Roberts. Post-production of the TTRP is done by Patrick Ancheski and John Cimino. If you'd like to follow us via social media, you can search Turnbuckle Talk Radio Podcast on Facebook. You can follow us at Twitter by using the name Turnbuckle_Talk. Or if you have questions or concerns, you can reach us via email at turnbuckletlkradio@gmail.com. We'd like to thank you for listening to the Turnbuckle Talk Radio Podcast, downloading our episodes, following us on social media, and interacting with us.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.